on the shining planet of Vega Prime, where towers touched the clouds and rivers of light flowed through silver cities. There lived an alien billionaire named Zorath Val. He owned half the world, commanded armies of machines, and spoke to rulers across galaxies, but inside his crystal palace, behind layers of glowing shields and guards, there was silence because his only daughter, Lyra Val, was dying. Lyra was not like other children of Vega. Her skin was pale like moonlight, her eyes shimmered blue like frozen oceans, but her breath was weak, shallow, fading more each day. Her lungs were collapsing, unable to process the pure atmosphere of Vega Prime. The best alien doctors from across the galaxy had tried everything. They injected nanobots, replaced organs, even begged the stars for solutions, but nothing worked. Every breath she took sounded like glass breaking. Zorath stood beside her bed, watching machines blink red and yellow. He had spent fortunes that could buy small planets. Yet no cure existed, he whispered. I would give my empire for one more day with you. Lyra, her small fingers reached out and touched his metallic arm. Father, she whispered weakly, I dreamed of the blue world again. The one called Earth, Zorath froze. Earth, the forgotten home of the humans, a species most aliens saw as dirty scavengers. They were the lowest form of life in the galactic core. He smiled sadly. Earth is far away, child, but Lyra smiled faintly. Still, I heard them singing, then she fell asleep, her chest rising slower than before outside. Vega Prime storm clouds began to gather. A deep thunder rolled through the sky as if the world itself mourned. Far away, near the industrial wastelands, a broken transport ship entered the planet's atmosphere. It burned like a comet, trailing smoke and metal parts. Alarms screamed through the lower districts. The craft crashed into the shadowed side of the city, breaking through layers of steel and dust. The impact shook the ground, and for a long moment, no one moved. From the wreckage, a single man crawled out. His clothes were torn, his face covered in ash, and his left arm burned. He was human, one of the last refugees from the old Earth colonies. His name was Eli Graves. Once long ago, he had been a bioengineer, a man who worked to create new organs for soldiers during the Earth Wars. But war had taken everything from him, his home, his lab, his purpose. Now he was nothing but a drifter in the galaxy, moving from junk planet to junk planet, searching for a reason to keep breathing. He looked up at the shining city towers far above him. Even from the ground, he could see the palace of Zorath glowing like a small sun. He coughed hard, tasting blood in his throat. Then he heard something strange, a soft sound carried by the wind and a cry. Not the cry of a machine, but the cry of a living child. It echoed faintly through the metallic air. Eli turned his head, listening again. The sound came from the direction of the palace. He didn't know why, but something inside him moved. Maybe it was memory. Maybe it was pain. Maybe it was hope. He started walking, slowly, step by step, toward the sound. At the palace gates, guards in silver armor noticed him. They pointed their plasma rifles and shouted, "Stay back, human." But Eli kept walking, his voice rough but calm. I heard a child crying. The guards laughed. No human steps foot here. They shoved him to the ground. But Eli's eyes burned with quiet anger. He stood again and said, "Then tell her father the crying won't stop until someone listens." One of the guards froze. Unsure how to respond, there was something strange about this human. Not fear. But purpose. Word reached Zorath quickly. He ordered, "Bring the creature to me." Moments later, Eli stood in the golden chamber surrounded by alien scientists and guards. Zorath looked down from his throne. "You are far from home, human," Eli nodded. "So is your daughter." The room fell silent. Zorath's eyes narrowed. "How do you know of her?" Eli replied, "I heard her cry." Zorath laughed bitterly. "You think you can help? You a beggar from a dying world?" Eli looked up, his voice steady. "I've built lungs before, for humans who shouldn't have lived." Zorath frowned, half amused, half curious. "And you think your primitive Earth tricks can save my daughter?" Eli simply said, "Let me see her," before Zorath could answer. A soft voice came from behind the curtains. "Father," Lyra whispered, walking weakly into the light. Her face was pale, her breathing shallow, but her eyes locked onto the human. "He smells like Earth," she said softly. Almost smiling, Zorath turned, startled. "Lyra." "Go back to bed," but she shook her head. "Please, Father." Let him try. For the first time in years, Zorath felt something strange, a spark of hope mixed with fear. He looked at the human and then at his daughter. After a long silence, he said coldly, "You have 1 night, human. 1 night to prove your words." Eli bowed slightly. "That's all I need." As the guards led him to the medical chamber beneath the palace, Lyra watched quietly. In her weak heart, she felt a strange warmth. Maybe it was faith, maybe destiny. But deep inside, something whispered to her. This human was not ordinary. He had the eyes of someone who had lost everything, yet still refused to give up. And in a world where no alien dared to challenge fate, one broken man from Earth had just stepped forward to fight it. Suspense ending. Outside the palace, thunder rolled again. In Vega's twin moons shone through the storm. The galaxy was about to witness a miracle born from the hands of a forgotten human. The night on Vega Prime was never truly dark. Neon lights painted the sky, and thunder rolled across the shining towers like drums of war. Inside the grand palace of Zorath Vale, silence ruled again. The alien king watched from the observation deck as the strange human, Eli Graves, was led through the silver halls below. He could not believe his own decision, allowing a homeless wanderer from Earth to touch his dying daughter. But Lyra's words still echoed in his mind. "Please, Father, let him try." Eli walked slowly, his boots scraping against the crystal floor. Every alien that passed looked at him with disgust or curiosity. To them, humans were dirty, poor, and dangerous. A failed species that had destroyed its own world. 2 guards followed close behind, ready to shoot him if he made one wrong move. Eli didn't care, he had nothing left to lose. The medical chamber was huge, filled with glowing tubes and floating data screens. Alien doctors stood there silent and angry, as if his presence alone was an insult. One of them, a tall alien with emerald skin, hissed, "You think your primitive science can save her?" Eli looked at him calmly. "I don't think." "I'll find out." They laughed bitterly, but Eli ignored them. He moved to the side of Lyra's bed and began to study her. Her breathing was shallow, her heart rate fading, and her veins glowed faintly with blue light. He whispered to himself, "Her lungs can't handle the oxygen ratio." Zorath stepped closer. "Explain yourself, human." Eli pointed to the medical display. "Your atmosphere is too pure, too bright, too alive for her organs." He paused. "If I'm right, her body was born half human." Gasps filled the room. Zorath's face turned pale. "What are you saying?" Eli didn't look away. "Someone in her bloodline had human DNA." For a moment the room froze. Then the alien doctor shouted, "Blasphemy!" "Lies!" Zorath raised his hand for silence, his voice low and dangerous. "How do you know this?" Eli replied softly. "Because I've seen lungs like these before, on children born in the ruins of Mars colonies." He knelt beside Lyra and touched her hand gently. Her skin was cold, but her pulse still faintly beat. He whispered, "Your body is fighting to survive in air that doesn't belong to you." Lyra's eyes flickered open for a moment, her voice weak. "Can you help me?" Eli smiled faintly. "Yes, but I'll need more than alien medicine." Zorath crossed his arms. "What do you need?" Eli stood straight, his voice firm. "I need a lab, metal, and silence." The king narrowed his eyes. "You'll have 1 night. Human." He turned to the guards. "If he fails, end him before sunrise." Eli didn't flinch. "Fair deal." Deep below the palace, they placed him in a cold laboratory filled with discarded tech and old machines. Eli's eyes scanned the tools. Alien instruments mixed with strange glowing minerals. He whispered to himself, "Same as Earth, just shinier." He started working fast, pulling wires, mixing materials, and sketching on the floor with a broken stylus. His mind returned to the past, to his lab on Earth. He remembered building lungs for soldiers poisoned by radiation. He remembered the moment the war destroyed it all, leaving him drifting in the dark. Now standing on an alien world, he felt that old fire again. He whispered, "Maybe this time I can save someone." While he worked, 2 alien scientists watched from behind the glass. One muttered, "Humans are insane." The other replied, "Yes, but dangerous things sometimes work." Hours passed and Eli created a strange design. He combined Earth nanobots, tiny machines stored in his old wrist module, with the alien Vega crystals. When merged, they created a reaction of light and movement. He smiled to himself. "Adaptive lungs," he whispered. "Lungs that learn," but the process needed testing. He looked at the glowing tube and then at his own arm. He hesitated, then gritted his teeth. He injected the serum into his bloodstream. The pain hit like fire. He fell to his knees, gasping. His body burned as the nanobots adapted to Vega's air. Rewriting his cells, minutes felt like hours, then suddenly, he took a deep breath. Clean. Smooth, strong. He stood up, trembling but alive. He looked at the sample in his hand and whispered, "It works." At that moment, the lab doors opened. Lyra stood there with her father, her face pale but eyes curious. Zorath's voice echoed coldly. "You're testing human drugs on yourself?" Eli nodded. "I don't test on children." Zorath studied him in silence. Torn between anger and respect, finally, he said, "If this fails, you die." Eli smiled faintly. "If it fails, we both lose her." He placed the crystal lungs inside a containment chamber. Their glow pulsed like a heartbeat, half blue, half silver. Lyra stared at them in wonder. "They're beautiful," Eli replied softly. "They'll let you breathe again, but far above." In the halls of Vega's High Council, someone was watching. A spy drone transmitted everything to the lawmakers. One of the elder aliens snarled, "The human dares to merge his blood with ours. That breaks the galactic purity law." Another voice said coldly, "No creature should change the design of life itself." They issued an order. At sunrise, the human must be executed and the experiment destroyed. Back in the lab, unaware of his coming death, Eli continued his work. He whispered, "Just a few more hours." Lyra, weak but awake, watched him carefully. Her voice soft, "Why are you helping me, human?" Eli smiled without looking up. "Because once someone tried to save my sister and failed, I won't fail again." Lyra blinked back tears. "Do you miss your home?" He paused for a long time, then said quietly, "Every breath, suspense ending." As dawn began to rise, the first light of Vega touched the lab's walls. Eli's creation was almost ready, but above him, soldiers were already preparing their weapons. The High Council had given the order. Before the next sunrise, the human must die. The first light of Vega's twin suns spilled into the palace halls. Their golden beams touched the glass towers, painting the city in fire and silver. Inside the underground lab, Eli Graves was still awake, his hands shaking, his eyes bloodshot. He had not slept, not eaten, not even blinked long enough to rest. But the device on the table before him, the glowing pair of artificial lungs, pulsed with life. They shimmered like tiny stars, breathing in rhythm with his own heart. Lyra lay on the surgical bed nearby, weak but awake. She watched the human move around the lab like a ghost of determination. Eli whispered to himself, "Almost ready, kid. Almost there." Her voice came out soft and broken. "Does it hurt the way you test on yourself?" Eli smiled faintly without looking up. "Pain means it's working." Lyra blinked slowly. "Why do you care so much?" He paused for a long moment, then said quietly, "Because no one cared when my people were dying." Above them, alarms pulsed quietly in the palace. The High Council's order had been received. Zorath had 1 hour before the soldiers arrived to execute the human. He stood before his advisors, torn between duty and love. One of his generals said firmly, "If you protect the human, you risk your throne." Zorath turned toward the window. His reflection cold and tired, he whispered, "Let them come. My daughter's life is worth more than their laws." Down in the lab, Eli began the final stage. He connected the artificial lungs to a small containment field powered by Vega crystals. The crystals hummed with energy, forming threads of blue lightning across the glass. He held his breath. If the molecules aligned wrong, everything would explode for a moment. The lab filled with silence, then with a soft pulse of light. The lungs began to breathe on their own. Each movement looked organic. Each rhythm matched Lyra's weak heartbeat. Eli's eyes widened. "It's alive," he whispered. "Not metal, not flesh, and something new." Lyra tried to smile. "You made life." Eli shook his head slowly. "No, I made a chance." But just as he prepared to begin the transplant, the lab's doors burst open. Zorath entered with 2 guards, his cloak fluttering in the artificial wind. "Eli," he said sharply, "the council has ordered your death." Eli looked up, unfazed. "Then I'd better work faster." Zorath stepped closer. "You don't understand. The law forbids mixing blood and machine across species. It's punishable by death." Eli glanced at Lyra, then back at Zorath. "Tell me, will your laws breathe for her?" Zorath said nothing, his metallic jaw clenched tight. Eli turned to the table and began connecting the breathing apparatus. His hands moved fast but steady, guided by years of forgotten skill. Lyra's breathing was fading, her skin pale, her heart weak. He whispered, "Stay with me, kid. You're stronger than this," she tried to answer. But no sound came out. Her heartbeat slowed. Her chest barely moved. Eli looked at the monitor. She had minutes left, maybe less. He grabbed the injector and filled it with nanobots mixed with Vega energy. Then he paused, his mind flashing with memories of the war on Earth. He remembered soldiers gasping in toxic air, remembered holding his dying sister. He had failed her once. He wouldn't fail again, he whispered, "not this time," and began the procedure. Zorath watched in silence, torn between fear and awe. Eli's hands trembled as he replaced Lyra's damaged organs with the new artificial lungs. The nanobots surged through her veins, glowing like tiny stars under her skin. The machines around them beeped faster, reading strange signals, half human, half alien. Lyra's body arched, her eyes glowing faintly blue. The light from her chest grew brighter until the entire room shimmered. Zorath shouted, "What's happening?" Eli gritted his teeth. "Her body is fighting the merge. I need to stabilize it." He pressed a control pad. Adjusting the molecular balance, sparks flew, alarms screamed. Glass cracked. Still, Eli didn't stop. His fingers bled as he forced the code sequence to sync with her DNA. He whispered, "Come on, Lyra, breathe." And then silence. All lights went out for a moment. The world seemed to hold its breath. Zorath took a slow step forward, his heart heavy. But then a soft sound filled the room. A single inhale followed by a deeper exhale. Lyra's chest rose, steady, strong. Her eyes opened, bright, clear, and alive. She gasped and whispered, "I can breathe." Eli sank to his knees. Exhausted but smiling, he whispered, "Told you it'd work." Zorath stared in disbelief. You did it." Eli nodded weakly. "No, she did. She just needed the right air." Lyra reached for her father's hand, tears in her glowing eyes. "He saved me, Father." For a brief, fragile moment, peace filled the room. But peace never lasts long in the galaxy. Above them, the sound of heavy boots echoed through the palace corridors. Dozens of soldiers stormed down the stairs, weapons ready. The High Council's insignia glowed on their armor. A voice rang through the halls, cold and merciless. "By order of the Galactic law, the human in the experiment are to be terminated immediately." Zorath turned toward the door, fury in his voice. "She's alive. He saved her." The commander replied, "It doesn't matter. The law forbids such creation. It threatens the order of life." Eli stood slowly, placing himself between Lyra and the soldiers, his body weak but his voice steady. "You'll have to go through me first," the commander sneered. "You're human. You're already dead." Zorath's hands clenched. Torn between his loyalty to the law and the love for his daughter, Lyra cried out, "Father, please." The soldiers raised their plasma rifles. The room filled with the hum of charging weapons. "Suspense ending," Eli whispered under his breath. "Then let's see if humanity still has fight left in it." The next second, the doors exploded with light. The battle for one child's breath, and for the soul of two species, had begun. The air inside the palace turned electric. Alarms screamed through the marble halls, echoing like war drums. Guards in silver armor rushed down corridors shouting orders. The symbol of the Galactic High Council flashed on every screen. The human engineer, Eli Graves, had broken the purity code by creating life that mixed alien and human blood. He had committed the highest crime, deep inside the underground lab. Eli stood between Lyra and the door. His clothes were torn, his hands burned, but his eyes were alive with fire. Behind him, Lyra sat on the medical bed, breathing freely for the first time in her life. Her new lungs glowed softly inside her chest, pulsing like two silver hearts. Eli turned to her and whispered, "You can breathe now." "That's all that matters." Lyra reached out, her voice trembling. "But they'll kill you." Eli smiled faintly. "They'll have to catch me first." The heavy doors of the lab burst open, and soldiers stormed in. Their rifles hummed with blue energy. Their commander shouted, "Step away from the child, human!" Eli didn't move. Zorath appeared behind the soldiers, his armor shining like molten gold. His voice thundered, "Stand down." But the soldiers ignored him. They followed the orders of the High Council, not a grieving father. Lyra screamed, "Stop! He saved me." But the commander only replied coldly, "The law does not care who you save." Eli's mind raced. He knew fighting them would be suicide. But surrender meant Lyra's death too, he whispered. Zorath. There's a service tunnel under the lab. Help me get her out. Zorath hesitated, torn between duty and his heart. Then he said quietly, Go. He stepped in front of the soldiers, blocking their way. You will not touch my daughter. Eli grabbed Lyra's hand and pulled her toward the back wall. He pressed a hidden panel, revealing a narrow tunnel lit by faint blue lights. They ran, their footsteps echoing in the metallic corridor. Behind them they could hear Zorath shouting, You'll have to go through me first. The sound of gunfire followed. Lyra looked back, tears in her eyes. He's fighting for us. Eli kept running. Then we make it worth it. The tunnel led to the lower districts of Vega Prime. A world far different from the shining city above. Here the air was thick with smoke, and the ground was covered in rust and dust. Machines wheezed, and alien scavengers watched from the shadows. Lyra struggled to keep up, coughing slightly. Eli stopped and adjusted her breathing mask. You're okay, just breathe slow, she nodded, her eyes wide with both fear and wonder. I've never seen this part of the world before. Eli smiled tiredly. Most kings never do. Far above, the High Council's transmission spread across the galaxy. The human known as Eli Graves is to be captured or terminated, the voice announced. All systems are ordered to cooperate. Posters of Eli's face flashed across holographic billboards. The message was clear. The human who created life would be hunted to death. Meanwhile, back in the palace, Zorath fought fiercely. Guards surrounded him, demanding he surrender the location of the fugitives. He roared, My daughter lives because of him. If that is a crime, then I am guilty too. But they overpowered him, locking him in a containment field. Before they dragged him away, he whispered, Run, Eli. Run. Down in the lower city, Eli and Lyra reached the old cargo docks. A dozen broken ships sat rusting in the shadows. Eli searched desperately for anything that could still fly. Lyra pointed weakly. That one. It was an old maintenance shuttle. Half buried in debris, Eli climbed inside, rewired the control panel, and prayed the old tech would respond. The engines coughed, sputtered, then roared to life. Eli grinned. Looks like luck hasn't given up yet. As they prepared to take off, a group of bounty hunters appeared at the entrance. They were alien mercenaries, drawn by the Council's bounty. Their leader hissed, You're worth a fortune. Human. Eli stepped forward, blocking Lyra with his body. Sorry, she's not for sale. They opened fire, bolts of plasma lighting up the dark. Eli ducked behind a metal crate, his arm bleeding from a near miss. He grabbed a piece of the shuttle's fuel pipe, twisted it open and threw a spark. The entire dock erupted in flame. The blast sent the hunters flying backward. Giving him seconds to act, he grabbed Lyra, pushed her into the shuttle and slammed the door. The shuttle rose shakily into the smoky air. Lyra gasped, staring through the window. We're flying! Eli smiled faintly. Not for long if I can't fix the stabilizer. The ship jerked violently, alarms flashing red. He fought with the controls, sweat dripping from his face. Finally, the shuttle leveled out, soaring over the glowing skyline of Vega. The entire city below glittered like fireflies in a storm. Lyra looked at him with awe. You risked everything for me. Eli kept his eyes on the horizon. I didn't risk it. I chose it, she frowned softly. Why? He hesitated, then said, Because once, someone risked everything for me and I couldn't save them. I won't let that happen again. Lyra's eyes shimmered. Then maybe you were sent here for me. Eli gave a small smile. Or maybe you were sent here to remind me what being human means, but peace didn't last. A fleet of council ships appeared behind them. Lights flashing through the clouds, their sirens echoed across the night. Unidentified vessel. Power down your engines. Surrender immediately. Eli looked back at the dozens of ships closing in. He muttered, They don't give up, do they? Lyra grabbed his hand. What do we do? Eli grinned, his voice calm even as danger closed in. We run faster. He pushed the throttle forward and the shuttle dove into the storm. Lightning danced across the hull, the engines screamed. The council ships followed close, firing beams of light that tore through the sky. Eli maneuvered through the chaos, dodging explosions. The entire planet seemed to tremble under the chase. Suspense ending. Lyra looked at him, terrified. They'll shoot us down. Eli smirked, his eyes burning with determination. Only if they can catch me. As thunder roared around them, the small human ship vanished into the clouds, leaving behind a trail of smoke and legend. The storm had faded. The sky over Vega Prime glowed red from the rising suns. The broken shuttle drifted through the upper atmosphere, its engines smoking. Inside, Eli Graves held the controls tightly. His arms trembling beside him, Lyra Vale clutched the edge of her seat, her glowing lungs rising and falling with steady rhythm. She could breathe, she could live, but the galaxy had decided she should not. The ship shook violently, warning lights flashing across the cabin. Eli muttered under his breath, "She's holding together." "Barely." He turned toward Lyra, his tone softer. "You okay?" She nodded, her small voice calm. "Better than ever, thanks to you." Eli smiled weakly. "Then I did something right." Far behind them, the High Council's fleet was still searching. The broadcast spread across star systems. The human named Eli Graves has broken the Galactic Purity Code. His experiment threatens the balance of life, to most. He was a monster, but to Lyra he was the reason she still breathed. As the shuttle drifted toward the dark side of the planet, alarms suddenly blared again. A tractor beam locked onto them from above. A deep voice echoed through the comm. "This is the Galactic Authority. You are under arrest." Eli sighed quietly. "Guess they caught up." He looked at Lyra and whispered, "No matter what happens, don't stop breathing." Moments later, bright light filled the cabin. Soldiers in white armor surrounded the ship. They dragged Eli and Lyra out, shackled and silent. Lyra tried to speak, but one soldier struck her across the face. Eli roared, "Don't touch her!" The guards hit him with an electric rod, forcing him to his knees. He spat blood but kept his eyes burning. "You call yourselves civilized?" The commander sneered. "We call ourselves clean." They were taken aboard a massive council ship and transported to the Galactic High Court, the largest structure in the Vega system, a place where law outweighed mercy. Inside, beings from dozens of species filled the seats, whispering and watching. News drones hovered overhead, broadcasting every second. At the center of the grand chamber stood two figures. One human, one alien child. Lyra stood close to Eli, her small hands trembling. He looked down at her and said softly, "Don't be afraid. Truth has its own power," she whispered back. "But do they care about truth?" Eli smiled sadly. "They will, or they'll choke on their lies." A booming voice filled the hall. The High Judge, a massive alien covered in golden scales, stared down at them. "Eli Graves of Earth," the judge thundered. "You are accused of violating the purity law, creating hybrid life, and defying the natural order of the galaxy."
"How do you plead?"
Eli raised his head, his voice calm. "Guilty, Resum, of saving a child." Gasps echoed through the hall. The judge's eyes narrowed. "You mock this court?" Eli replied, "I mock laws that value blood over breath." The chamber erupted in noise, shouts, protests, and flashes of anger. Zorath Vale, wounded but alive, was escorted into the hall. He had escaped the palace and come to testify. He stood before the court and spoke with deep pain. "My daughter would have died if not for this man. He saved her life when no one else could," one counselor hissed. "At what cost? He defied the order of existence." Zorath slammed his fist on the podium. "Then existence is broken." Lyra stepped forward, her voice shaking but clear. "Your law says no species should mix, but I didn't ask to be born this way. I didn't ask to die." She turned toward the crowd, her lungs glowing softly. "He gave me air. Not power, not weapons, just air." For a moment, even the judges fell silent. Eli took a step forward. "Your galaxy builds walls around life, but life doesn't care about walls." He opened his palm, revealing a small sample of the nanotech crystal he used to build Lyra's lungs. "This," he said, "can save millions who live on dying worlds. It adapts to any atmosphere, any species." One of the judges leaned forward. "Or destroy them if used as a weapon." Eli nodded. "Yes, if placed in the wrong hands." Like every tool ever made by fear, the hall went quiet again. Zorath turned to the judges. "I offer my life for his freedom. If a father's word still matters." The head judge looked down coldly. "The law cannot be traded." Eli's voice cut through the silence. "Then maybe your law isn't justice. It's just control." Before the judge could respond, the lights flickered. A deep static crackled through the comms. Suddenly, all the hollow screens in the chamber changed. A masked alien figure appeared, Surrounded by armed soldiers, a voice echoed across the hall. "The human must not live. His creation belongs to us." The crowd gasped in fear. Zorath shouted, "Who are you?" The voice laughed, "We are the Syndicate, and his invention will make us gods." Explosions tore through the building. Smoke filled the air. People screamed, and guards ran for cover. Lyra coughed, clutching her chest. Eli grabbed her hand. "Stay with me." He looked at Zorath, who was already drawing his plasma blade. Zorath shouted, "Go, take her out of here." Eli hesitated. "I won't leave you." Zorath's eyes burned with pain and pride. "She's my world. Now she's yours to protect." Eli nodded once, grabbed Lyra, and ran through the chaos. The building shook as fire rained from above. Syndicate soldiers swarmed the halls, shooting at everything that moved. Eli ducked behind a pillar, shielding Lyra from the blasts. He yelled, "You okay?" She nodded weakly. "I can breathe, but we can't stay here." He smiled through blood and smoke. "Then let's give the galaxy something to remember." They reached a side exit, alarms wailing louder. Behind them, Zorath fought until he was surrounded, his last words echoing, "Run." Suspense ending. As Eli and Lyra escaped into the burning night, the Council Tower collapsed behind them. The galaxy now burned with chaos, and somewhere in the smoke, the words of the dying alien king whispered through the air. "The law may chase you, human, but history will remember who truly saved life." The night sky over Vega Prime burned red. Smoke rose from the ruins of the Galactic High Court. Flames danced across broken towers as ships exploded in midair. The Syndicate had attacked without mercy. Their goal was clear: capture the human engineer and take the technology that could make them gods. Eli Graves ran through the shattered streets carrying Lyra Vale in his arms. Her glowing lungs flickered in the dark like twin stars. Behind them, the sound of plasma fire echoed through the smoke. He stumbled but never stopped. "Almost there, kid," he muttered, his voice hoarse. "Just a little more." Lyra coughed softly, gripping his jacket. "Father, he's still in there." Eli's eyes burned with guilt. "He bought us time. Now we have to make it count." They reached the old industrial district on the edge of the city. Massive steel towers rose like ghosts. It was here years ago that humans once worked as slaves before the war. Now it was empty, forgotten. Eli placed Lyra down beside an old cargo bay door. His chest rising and falling with exhaustion, he said quietly, "We'll hide here until I can get us off this planet." Lyra looked up at him, her voice soft but steady. "They'll never stop hunting you." Eli gave a small, tired smile. "Then I'll just have to run faster." He started rewiring the door's old energy grid. Using broken tools and bits of metal, every spark lit his face. A mix of pain, defiance, and determination. In the distance, sirens wailed again. The Syndicate was scanning the city. Tracking his life signs, Lyra watched him silently, her young heart full of confusion and awe. "You risked everything for me," she whispered. "Why?" Eli paused, his voice soft. "Because someone once saved me, and I couldn't save them back." He looked into her bright blue eyes. "You're my second chance." Suddenly, a loud crash shook the ground. A Syndicate warship descended from the sky, black and sharp as a blade. Dozens of armed aliens dropped from its hull. Surrounding the factory ruins, Lyra gasped, "They found us." Eli pulled her behind a wall. "Stay low." Blinding lights swept across the metal floor, followed by the sound of marching boots. The Syndicate commander shouted, "Bring me the human alive." "The girl's lungs are the key." Eli's hands trembled slightly as he reached for a plasma cutter. He whispered, "Guess we're out of hiding." He darted from cover, firing the cutter like a weapon. Bolts of light exploded against the Syndicate armor. Sending sparks into the air, he ducked, rolled, and fired again, shouting, "Or come and get me." The aliens returned fire, beams cutting through metal and smoke. One shot grazed his shoulder, burning flesh and fabric, but he kept moving. Lyra screamed, "Eli!" He turned and smiled, blood on his lips. Still breathing. She crawled toward a broken console, her small hand shaking as she tried to help. She pressed a glowing button on the side panel, releasing thick gas across the room. The smoke blinded the soldiers for a few seconds, enough for Eli to grab her and run toward the back exit. Outside, the wind howled across the night. They reached the end of a steel bridge overlooking the burning city. Below them, molten rivers of energy glowed from broken power lines. Lyra looked down, terrified. "There's nowhere left to go." Eli glanced behind, syndicate soldiers closing in him, and whispered, "There's always somewhere." He pulled a small data core from his pocket, the blueprint of the adaptive lungs, the reason they were being hunted. He looked at it, then at Lyra, and said softly, "This doesn't belong to them, it belongs to life." He handed the data core to her. "Listen to me, Lyra," he said, kneeling in front of her. "Take this and run when I tell you, no matter what happens." Her eyes filled with tears. "I won't leave you." He smiled, his voice breaking. "You have to. You're the proof that we can change." She shook her head. "They'll kill you." He wiped the tears from her cheek. "Not if I go first," the syndicate commander shouted from the shadows. "There's nowhere to run, human." Eli stood tall, the plasma cutter glowing in his hand. "You're right, but there's somewhere to fall." He grabbed a damaged power coil and ripped the wire loose. Sparks flew, electricity crackling through the metal bridge. Lyra cried out, "Eli, don't!" He turned to her one last time, his eyes full of warmth. "Keep breathing." "Kid," he threw the wire into the broken reactor below. A blinding surge of energy roared through the structure. The entire bridge lit up like lightning. The explosion tore through the syndicate troops, sending fire and shockwaves across the ruins. The impact hurled Lyra backward, her body crashing into a pile of debris. When the dust settled, she crawled out coughing. "Eli!" The bridge was gone, reduced to glowing ash. Only fragments of twisted metal floated in the air. Lyra stared into the flames, tears streaming down her cheeks, her lungs glowed brighter. Reacting to the storm of energy around her, she whispered, "You saved me again." From behind, a group of Vega medics and guards arrived, loyal to her father. They surrounded her, guiding her to safety. One asked gently, "Where is the human?" Lyra looked up at the sky, her voice trembling. "He's in the light." Suspense ending. As the fire faded and silence returned to Vega Prime, the wind carried a faint whisper through the ruins. It sounded like Eli's voice, soft and distant. "Tell her humans aren't monsters." Lyra closed her eyes, clutching the glowing data core to her heart, and for the first time, the galaxy mourned the loss of a human who had done the impossible. He gave life where there was none, and hope where there was only hate. Years had passed since the night Vega Prime burned. The war between the High Council and the Syndicate had ended, but the scars remained across the stars. Cities once made of glass now stood half broken, and the laws that ruled galaxies had been rewritten in flame. But in the middle of all that ruin, a single light kept shining. The light of Lyra Val. She was no longer the fragile child who once gasped for air in her father's palace. Now she stood as the youngest ambassador in Vega's history. Her lungs, glowing faintly beneath her silver robes, had become a living symbol of peace between species. She traveled across worlds, speaking to rulers, scientists and soldiers everywhere she went. She carried a small crystal device, the blueprint of Eli Graves's invention, the same one that had cost him everything in time. Hospitals began using his design to help the sick and dying. Children who could not breathe their planet's air were given new life. Workers could travel to different worlds without masks or fear. And slowly, for the first time in centuries, the galaxy began to heal. But Lyra never forgot the man who made it possible. The human who lived and died without asking for reward. In her private chamber on Vega Prime, she kept his tools locked in a glass case, his burned gloves, his broken wrist module, and a small photo chip from Earth. Sometimes, when the nights grew quiet, she would play the recording stored inside. It was his voice, cracked and tired, saying, "Keep breathing, kid." She would close her eyes, whisper back, "I still am." One day the Galactic Assembly gathered for a historic moment. The Purity Code, the law that once forbade the mixing of species, was to be erased forever. Lyra stood before the crowd, her heart pounding. Her voice echoed through the grand hall. "A human saved me when all your laws failed. He broke the code, but he gave us life." She lifted a glowing crystal into the air. "This is his legacy. Proof that humanity was never weak, only forgotten." The crowd erupted into applause, some weeping openly. The judges who once condemned Eli now bowed their heads in shame. The new law was signed under the light of Vega's twin suns. From that day on, the galaxy called it the era of shared breath. After the ceremony, Lyra stood alone on the balcony overlooking the shining city. The wind was warm, carrying the scent of rain. She whispered to the sky, "You'd like this, Eli." For a moment, she thought she heard his voice in the wind. faint but real. Then she smiled through tears. Maybe you're watching, but peace never lasts forever. That same night, in the quiet of the palace gardens, a security drone flashed red. Someone had entered the restricted sector near the old memorials. Guards hurried toward the signal, but Lyra stopped them. I'll go. She walked through the dark corridors alone, the sound of her footsteps echoing against marble and metal. When she reached the memorial chamber, she froze. The statue of Eli Graves stood in the center, carved from silver and stone. He was shown holding a child in one arm, his other hand reaching toward the stars, but tonight something was different. The air shimmered faintly as if disturbed by invisible energy. A shadow moved behind the statue, tall, thin, familiar. Lyra's heart skipped a beat, her voice trembling. Who's there? The figure stepped into the light. His face was older, rougher, half covered by a metallic mask. One arm was cybernetic, the same design as the artificial lungs. His eyes glowed faintly gold, not alien, not machine, but human. He smiled softly. Still breathing, kid? Lyra gasped, her heart nearly stopping. Eli? He nodded slowly, mostly. For a moment, she could only stare. Then she ran forward and hugged him tightly, tears falling down her cheeks. I thought you died, she whispered. Eli chuckled quietly. So did I. He stepped back, looking at her with pride. You did it, didn't you? Changed the galaxy, Lyra nodded, because of you. He smiled faintly. No, because you believed. She shook her head. They should know you're alive. You deserve to be remembered. Eli looked toward the stars, his voice calm. I am remembered. Every time someone takes a breath they weren't meant to. That's enough. Lyra wiped her tears. Where did you go all these years? He sighed. Far beyond Vega. The Syndicate never stopped hunting me, so I stayed off their maps, fixed things, helped where I could. He held up his mechanical arm. Guess I became a little less human, and a little more something else. Lyra smiled through tears. You became what the galaxy needed. They stood together in silence, the wind whispering through the open chamber. Eli looked at her one last time. Keep doing what you're doing, Lyra, and don't let them forget. Humans aren't monsters. We're builders. She nodded slowly. I'll never forget. He turned to leave, his shadow stretching across the glowing floor. Lyra called out softly, Will I see you again? He paused, glanced over his shoulder, and said with a faint smile, Only if you stop breathing. And I don't plan to let that happen. Then, just like before, he disappeared into the night. No ship, no sound, just a flicker of light fading into the stars. The next morning, when the suns rose over Vega Prime, a single message appeared on every planetary broadcast. No one knew who sent it, but the words glowed in simple Earth script. Humanity was never gone. It was just waiting to be remembered. Lyra stood on the balcony, reading the message with a smile. The wind brushed through her hair, and somewhere far away, across 1,000 suns, a human engineer looked up at the same sky and whispered, Still breathing. Final line. And so, the galaxy learned that true strength didn't come from power or blood or law. It came from one small human heart that refused to stop caring.